Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So welcome to our reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, study really of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is where it's beginning with the first canto again. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Questions by the Sages at Naimisharanya Forest. We've done the first 3 verses, which are the prelude, and the narration begins with text 4, and we did that last time, so now we're up to text number 5. And first we'll say like this: Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. In text 4, once in a holy place in the forest of Naimisharanya, great sages headed by the sage Shonaka assembled to perform a great 1,000-year sacrifice for the satisfaction of the Lord and his devotees. And we talked about the word animisha kshetre. The word animisha, with unblinking eyes. All the gods have unblinking eyes, but Vishnu is referred to here. This is the place of Vishnu. And so that we now have the sages assembled there, and especially for people in Kali Yuga. Things are going to get rough, as you may have noticed. And so they wanted to help out. So in text 5 now, which we are up to 5, in this text, these sages now elevate Sri Sutta Goswami to the seat of honor, the Vyasasana. Text 5 goes like this: Ekadatu munaya pratar huta hutagnaya satkritam sutamasinam praprachur idamadarat. One day, after finishing their morning duties by burning a sacrificial fire and offering a seat of esteem to Srila Sutta Goswami, the great sages made inquiries with great respect about the following matters. It's the Sanskrit is actually te ekada, because of Sandhi rules. Te, the sages; ekada, once upon a time, one day. These sages, munayaha, sages and munis in plural, one morning, and then it says pratar huta hutagnayaha. Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's purport is just a comment on this phrase, huta hutagnayaha munayaha. He says it means sages, the sages who had offered oblations, huta, into the sacrificial fires, hutagnayaha, the munis. So these munis, they are, and so when he writes in the purport, he puts the huta hutagnayaha munayaha, the munis, who are the huta is an oblation into a fire, and so the fire is the sacrificial fire, huta agnayaha. It's not an ordinary fire; it's a hutagnaya, sacrificial fire. So they had done that. That's his whole purport, just to explain that. And then they, satkritam, Prabhupada translates it, due respect. They put him on, invited him to the seat with satkritam. The word satkrita in the dictionary is to show reverence, to pay respect, and so on. Satkritam, making krit, krit is making sat. So sat is, of course, to set right, be in order, proper, and so on. To treat, and then sat means just by itself, to treat well or with respect, honor, to treat or receive hospitably, just sat by itself. So satkrit, excuse me, it's not sat by itself, but the word in the dictionary is satkri, and so satkritam. Yeah, that's what they did. So they showed him due respect and reverence. Now, there is a purport for this verse by Srila Prabhupada. Let me use my screen here, it's easier. He says, morning is the best time to hold spiritual services. The great sages offered the speaker of the Bhagavatam an elevated seat of respect called the Vyasasana, or the seat of Sri Vyasadeva. Now remember, by the way, that this Bhagavatam is this part of Bhagavatam Prabhupada wrote before he came to the West. So he is assuming nobody knows anything. So he explains everything very carefully in the beginning. So this Vyasasana, the seat of Vyas, and so in the temple, of course, there's a seat for the speaker, an elevated seat for the guru and whoever the speaker is. So he explains why it's called, that speaker is called a Vyasasana. Sri Vyasadeva is the original spiritual preceptor for all men, and all other preceptors are considered to be his representatives. A representative is one who can exactly present the viewpoint of Sri Vyasadeva. So this is the theme that Prabhupada elaborates on in the beginning, that you have to follow the predecessors. You know, Prabhupada says somewhere, no additional meaning should be screwed out of the text, because if you go to school, they always try to find something clever that nobody's noticed. But here you're supposed to follow. So this is the representative. To represent means to present all over again. So it means being faithful to the tradition. A representative is one who can exactly present the viewpoint of Srila Vyasadeva. Srila Vyasadeva impregnated the message of the Bhagavatam unto Srila Sukadeva Goswami. Notice how he uses that word, impregnated. Something living was transmitted. So he impregnated the message of the Bhagavatam unto Srila Sukadeva Goswami, and Sri Suta Goswami heard it from him, Sri Sukadeva Goswami. All bona fide representatives of Sri Vyasadeva in the chain of disciplic succession are to be understood to be Goswamis. These Goswamis restrain all their senses, and they stick to the path made by the previous acharyas. The word go, the Swami means a master, and so go, sometimes it's the master of cows. It was the title of somebody who had a lot of cows, but here it also, the go is indicating senses. So the Goswamis restrain all their senses and they stick to the path made by the previous acharyas. The Goswamis do not deliver lectures on the Bhagavatam capriciously, that is, whimsically or whatever strikes you at the moment or whatever is your new invention. Rather, they execute their services most carefully, following their predecessors who delivered the spiritual message unbroken to them. And throughout this first chapter, this theme will be elaborated on by Srila Prabhupada. This idea of hearing, realizing the message. When it comes out, it may be inflected with your own particular personality and realizations, but it'll be also completely faithful. And so, and how is that possible? To actually do what Prabhupada says, to repeat exactly what, no changing, no additional, no meaning screwed out of it. And so, therefore, it requires this training of discipleship, that you take it in faithfully, it becomes your own realized knowledge. Realize, when Prabhupada says realized knowledge, it means experienced knowledge. There's direct perception. Pratyaksha avagamam dharmam. It gives us direct perception. So there's realized knowledge. And in the beginning, Prabhupada just said, just repeat what you have heard. So in the beginning, you may have to just, memorize the words and repeat them. And then gradually, as it sinks in and begins to potently change our own mentality, evacuating the modes of passion and ignorance, suddenly you'll be able to speak it in your own language sometimes, your own words. Not exactly the same, but faithful. The Goswamis do not deliver lectures on the Bhagavatam capriciously. Rather, they execute their services most carefully, following their predecessors who deliver the spiritual message unbroken to them. When I first heard this, I remembered something a lot of us used to hear. We do this game where I forgot the name, the telephone game, right? Somebody whispers something into one class person's ear, and that person whispers the next and whisper the next, and then by the time it comes to the end, it's all different, just to illustrate that you shouldn't trust this process. And one thinks of this, but we're just not regular people. If we're in this disciplic succession, we're training ourselves to be faithful and at the same time to make it our own. It's not just like you're a tape recorder either. One last paragraph in the purport. Those who listen to the Bhagavatam may put questions to the speaker in order to elicit the clear meaning, but this should not be done in a challenging spirit. One must submit questions with great regard for the speaker and the subject matter. This is also the way recommended in the Bhagavad Gita. One must learn the transcendental subject by submissive oral reception from the right source. Therefore, these sages address the speaker, Sutta Goswami, with great respect. So this is where you get this submissive oral reception. You notice that A-U-R-R, through the ears. Not oral, but oral. Two different places, the mouth and the ears. Submissive oral reception. You hear, you make it own, and that's why to gain transcendental knowledge, we also follow the four regulative principles. And these, as I like to stress these days, these principles are not to be thought of as merely moral principles, but are principles of knowledge. By those principles, the mode of goodness becomes prominent, and then you can start to be aware of many, many things that people in the mode of passion, in the mode of ignorance or mixtures don't know much about. Our standard of advancement in our culture in the West is the standard of the mode of passion. And that's not trustworthy for knowledge. And the idea of, it used to be, all teachers in the beginning, at least in the West, who were the teachers? It was the clergy. That's what they did. They taught schools. That was part of their dharma, was to do that, and that was the way it was in those days. Graduation gowns that we nowadays wear are monks' robes originally. that's so we used to be more in line with that way of thinking, but that's all over now. Except we're trying to bring it back. Okay, so that's text 5. Now in text 6. Now the 6, 7, and 8. As you can see with 6, Rishaya Uchaha. The rishis, the sages, here's the plural, rishayaha, the sages said. So this is the sages speaking, responding to Sutta Goswami. So in 6, 7, and 8, now we're going to hear the sages extol Sutta Goswami's exceptional qualifications. So, Rishaya Uchahu Tvaya Kalu Puranani Setihasani Charnaga Akyatanyapyaditani Dharmashastrani Yanyutta. The translation is, the sages said, respected Sutta Goswami, you are completely free from all vice. You are well versed in all the scriptures, famous for religious life, and in the Puranas and the histories as well, for you have gone through them under proper guidance and have also explained them. Bhanuswami has a slightly different translation. The sages said, O sinless Sutta, certainly you have not only studied, but also explained the Puranas and the Dharma Shastras, along with histories such as Mahabharata. It's a little different because he follows the commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So the sages, Rishaya, they said this by you, undoubtedly. And then what is he studied and explained? Two things, Akyatani, Api Aditani. You are these two things are there. You are well read, Aditani, and you've also explained. And here's the list of the Puranas, which in the word for word, the supplements to the Vedas with illustrative narrations. The Puranas. Sa, along with Itihasani, along with the histories. Itihasa is one collection of one group of shastras, and that's why he says with history such as the Mahabharata, itihasa means thus it happened. So the Mahabharata is considered itihasa, a history. The other itihasa, there are only two that I know of. The Ramayana is considered an itihasa. The Sanskrit in the itihasas is simple compared to like the Bhagavatam, for example, and even more complicated. It's very simple Sanskrit. I mean, you can read the Bhagavad Gita after a year of university Sanskrit, almost class. It's very, very simple. And the Mahabharata is the same way, and because it's in that. The Mahabharata is a very interesting thing that it was kind of put there to attract people with really interesting stories and heartbreak and narration. But in the middle, there's the Bhagavad Gita. That's spoken there, and the Bhagavad. I mean, amazing the amount of spiritual knowledge in the Bhagavad Gita. So that's of course excerpted and is presented on its own, but it's actually one section of the Mahabharata. And similarly, the Ramayana is very simple Sanskrit, the story of Lord Ramachandra and Sita and so on. So those are the itihasas, and that's why he says, along with histories such as the Mahabharata, the Puranas, Puranani, and the itihasas. You are well versed in all the scriptures, famous for religious life, the Dharma Shastranis, the scriptures that teach Dharma, right directions for progressive life. You notice how that's in the word for word. The Dharma Shastra tells you how to be a Brahmana, how to be a Kshatriya, how to be... It really is prescriptions for everything, so you make all spiritual advancement. So this is what it says there. So here's Srila Prabhupada's purport. I have to put my glasses on to read this book. Did we read the purport already? No. Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay. Look at. So again, the text is the sages said, "Respected Suta Goswami, you are completely free from all vice. You are well versed in all religious scriptures, the Puranas and histories, for you have gone through them under proper guidance and have also explained them." So now Prabhupada says, a Goswami, or bona fide representative of Srila Vyasadeva, must be free from all kinds of vices. The four major vices of Kali Yuga are: 1. Illicit connection with women. 2. Animal slaughter. 3. Intoxication. 4. Speculative gambling of all sorts. A Goswami must be free from all these vices before he can dare sit on the Vyasasana. No one should be allowed to sit on the Vyasasana who is not spotless in character and who is not freed from the above-mentioned vices. He should not only be freed from all such vices, but he must also be well versed in the revealed scriptures or the Vedas. The Puranas are also part of the Vedas, and histories like the Mahabharata or Ramayana, that's where he mentions that this is also their history, are also part of the Vedas. The Acharya, or the Goswami, must be well acquainted with all these literatures. To hear and explain them is more important than reading them. One can only assimilate the knowledge of the revealed scriptures by hearing and explaining. Hearing is called Shravana, and explaining is called Kirtana. The two processes of Shravana and Kirtana are of primary importance to progressive spiritual life. Only one who has properly grasped the transcendental knowledge from the right source by submissive hearing can properly explain the subject. So you can see how right off Prabhupada introduces this whole culture. And part of the learning process, even in the days of one-room schoolhouses, older children would teach the younger children. And if you read in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that was the pedagogical method that was used in Lord Chaitanya's time. In the school, the older students would always teach the younger students. Because that way, if you have to explain it, first of all, if you know you're going to have to teach it, you're going to really pay attention. And somebody's there to make sure you don't make a mistake. So you really are careful. And then because you teach it, you make it your own. This is the pedagogical method. The Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, but this is the standard pedagogical method. I mean, I really spent some time learning about that style of teaching during Lord Chaitanya's time, because I was thinking of, we should understand Lord Chaitanya as a teacher, because he was a teacher. He was, Nadia during his time, because of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, actually was the prime place for learning in India, or at least except for the South Indian. But anyway, that part of India, that was really, and he was the one that had done it, because he had studied in logic from a teacher who wouldn't let anybody have any notes or take notes or see the text. And then he memorized the whole thing and went back and taught it just by memory. So that also makes your memory very sharp if you start like this. So this is the standard pedagogical method. And you also have to remember that writing things down is not a sign of advancement. It's a sign of decline. The reason things are written down is because memories are bad. That's why Vyasa is doing all this, because he knows Kali Yuga is beginning. People's memories are going to get worse and worse. And so we have to commit this stuff to writing, to put it down so that people can keep it. Otherwise, they'll forget or get mixed up and things like that. So the fantasy, the myth of modern civilization is the myth of progress, and that writing is a sign of the advancement of civilization, and not the opposite. And people knew this not just in Vedic culture, but in Plato's dialogues. Socrates is complaining about writing and how people don't really assimilate things very well anymore because of writing. It's not really good for actually absorbing the subject matter, and you just get over the surface, or skate over the surface of things rather than get into the depths because of writing. So that he doesn't like it. So people knew that. But because memories are in Kali Yuga are so bad now, you write it down, and then so you have a fire destroy a library. I mean, the whole library in Alexandria is tons and tons of ancient works are never lost because of this big fire in Egypt. And, maybe some star explored somewhere and there's a microwave burst and it knocks out all our electronics. Where are we going to be? We don't know anything. Looking for books. Remember books? So anyway, this idea of progress is wrong. So is our myth that's very. I mean, we just drink it in with our mother's milk. So, but it's wrong. And so Vyas wrote this down, and now we're getting the instructions. We're using books because what else can you do? But Prabhupada also wanted to make sure these books were part of something else, an International Society for Krishna Consciousness, where people had to be trained to become the actual recipients of this knowledge and to teach it also. That's what he did. So this is this Shravanam. This is, and so Prabhupada tells right now, and he also tells that you have to be spotless in character, free from. But why is that? What do I know? There's so many scientists who turned out to be total creeps when it came to their personal life. Nasty people. Is that okay? Yeah. What's done with your work? Well, we're blowing up cities and we're having guided missiles and not so good. Not so good. It's used for evil. So this is Prabhupada explaining right from the beginning, and you can start to see that Prabhupada is talking about us. So this is really important right from the beginning that we get that. Maybe one more verse here. Okay. Did I catch everything on that one? This gets a little complicated in some ways because, when Vishwanath Chakravarti, he does 7 and 8 together as one verse, while Prabhupada does it as 2. But we'll do it separately, of course. So text 7. Yani Veda Vidam Shreshto Bhagavan Bhadarayanaha Anyecha Munaya Sutta Paravara Viduhu. Excuse me. Being the eldest learned Vedantist, O Sutta Goswami, you are acquainted with the knowledge of Vyasadeva, who is the incarnation of Godhead, and you also know other sages who are fully versed in all kinds of physical and metaphysical knowledge. Veda Vidam, the Veda Vit, this is Veda Vit Vedanta Eva Chaham. Veda Vit, those, here is in the plural, those scholars of the Vedas. So he who are Shrestha. Shrestha means old and therefore senior most or wide, the best. And that best person is Bhagavan Bhadarayanaha, Vyasadeva, who's Bhagavan. And here Prabhupada translates that as the incarnation of Godhead. And Bhagavan can actually be any lordly person, but here it's the Lord himself. And also Anye, other sages. and then you are one who knows these things, and those sages who are Paravaravida, the learned scholars who are conversant with physical and metaphysical knowledge. Now the word Paravara literally just means distant and nearby, earlier and later, prior and subsequent, higher and lower, but this translation of physical and metaphysical comes from actually if you look up the word physical, the word physical originally refers to material nature, the phenomenal universe perceived by the senses. And this comes from and the word metaphysical, this is from Aristotle, because Aristotle had a work where he discussed things like the four causation, the material cause of something, the efficient cause, the formal cause, the final cause. The material pot is matter, so the clay is the material cause. The formal, the efficient cause, the potter. The formal cause is his idea of the pot that he has in his head, that notion of this form. And then the final cause, what is the pot is being used for? Those are the four causes. That's the kind of thing that's in Aristotle. And he called that physical. And then he had another book called things after the next book he called metaphysical. And that only meant after the physics, after that book, and that sort of talked about bigger cosmological things. Doesn't necessarily mean higher, abstruse stuff, but that's where the word metaphysical comes from. And so anyway, so when Prabhupada is using it, it's sort of in an old-fashioned sense of this physical and metaphysical, higher and lower, and so on, like that, physical and metaphysical knowledge. That's what that means. So Prabhupada's purport here. He says, Srimad Bhagavatam is a natural commentation on the Brahma Sutra or the Badarayani Vedanta Sutras. It is called natural because Vyasadeva is the author of both the Vedanta Sutras and Srimad Bhagavatam, or the essence of all Vedic literatures. Now, another thing, because of the memory, that's why the sutras were there, so you could condense meaning into the shortest possible form. That's for mnemonic purposes, being able to remember them. And therefore, you would memorize the whole thing and then learn how to unpack it and what it meant. The sutras was there in the grammar. For every for architecture, there were all sutras. Everything with these sutras, so you could carry this condensed library. So this Brahma Sutra or Vedanta Sutra, uh, uh, and there are commentaries. I mean, because we considered Bhagavatam, as Prabhupada says here, the natural commentation on the Vedanta Sutras, the Brahma Sutras. That's why our school of thought traditionally did not have a commentary on the Vedanta Sutras until what's his name? Baladeva Vijayabhushana made it. So it's fairly late that he did one. And because we didn't need one, and then there was a kind of controversy whether we were really a school, and so he wrote a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, and it's a very good commentary. But we didn't think we needed one because the Bhagavatam was the natural commentation. That's what Prabhupada says here, because it's by the same person, and he's really explaining what's in the Vedanta Sutra. But the Vedanta deals with the higher level of the end of the Vedas, what the ultimate meaning of the Vedas is, and it has to do with liberation and understanding, the cause of all causes and everything. This is metaphysical, if you want to call it that. So that's why that it's this, where Prabhupada's this natural commentation. That's our tradition, although we do have one now. It goes on. Besides Vyasadeva, there are other sages who are the authors of 6 different philosophical systems, namely Gautama, Kanada, Kapila, Patanjali, Jaimini, and Astavakra. Theism is explained completely in the Vedanta Sutra, whereas in other systems of philosophical speculation, practically no mention is given of the ultimate cause of all causes. One can sit on the Vyasasana only after being conversant in all systems of philosophy, so that one can present fully the theistic view of the Bhagavatam in defiance of all other systems. Prabhupada was typically combative. He liked debate. Srila Sutta Goswami was the proper teacher, and therefore the sages at Naimisharanya elevated him to the Vyasasana. Srila Vyasadeva is designated herein as the personality of Godhead because he is the authorized, empowered incarnation. Yeah, Vyasa is a Shakti-avesh avatar. He's an avatar, one who descends, but he's not Vishnu Tattva. But he's empowered to act with a Shakti-avesh avatar, one who's not God, but is empowered in some way with one of God's potencies to do certain things. So that's Vyasadeva. I tell you what, because 7, 8 are done together, we'll do that next week with what done together by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. We'll do that together after we do 8. Anyway, yeah. So we'll the natural place to stop and see if there's anything more.
If you're on Facebook and you have a question, go ahead and type it into the comment section there. If you're on the phone, press *6 and that will unmute yourself. And everybody's welcome to use the chat box on Ravindra Svarupa's website. That is RSDasa.com. Before I get to some of the other questions, I'll jump in real quick. Early on when you were mentioning the telephone game, I always thought that, well, first off, we played that game a lot when I was in like elementary school. But there was always kind of a moral to the story. I mean, it was a fun game to play, but then there was the moral to it of the downside of, well, the negativity of gossip, right? Of how things can be spread. But I always thought it would be better off, and it would actually be a fun exercise in some sort of preaching environment, to play the telephone game one time, get a good laugh out of it, and then turn it around again and actually have one person as the speaker really understanding a particular sentence or something, telling the next person, making sure that next person really understands it, and so on and so forth, going down the line, and really being careful that the speaker is speaking correctly and the hearer is hearing correctly, and then the end result, being that the sentence is in fact translated through people accurately. So just a comment on that.
Would be nice.
A few questions down the pipe here. One quick second to get to all these. Okay, so Kendra Prabhu, he asks, he quotes, a representative is one who can exactly present the viewpoint of Sri Vyasadeva. And then that's end quote. Contemporary online culture seems to encourage faithlessness. Everyone is a guru, and no one is a guru. The importance of parampara seems to be less and less appreciated. Would you like to say anything more about the absolute necessity for submissive faithfulness to genuine spiritual authority? Thank you.
Well, I've said a lot about it already. That's really the throughout this first chapter. I mean, Prabhupada really. Just think that he's coming to America. He's got these people who are not taught in this way whatsoever. And somehow or other, the idea of taking these people, taking, as he put the bird analogy, taking crows and turning them into swans, was his Paramahamsa, right? A hamsa it's a goose, but anyway, it flies over the Himalayas, high-flying hamsas. And so these Paramahamsas. So that's what we're trained to do, and so we're going. I mean, if you see that there are devotees who are becoming more and more absorbed in Krishna consciousness and developing it and making it their own and pushing it on, and the other thing is going worse. Then you notice that there's a divergence, and things are getting what people call polarized, and that seems to me to be what would happen. When Prabhupada came, there were people who were potentially devotees or inclined in that way, and there were people who were very demonic. And now it's sort of like two camps. Those who are demonic are getting more demonic, and those who are more godly are getting more godly. I think that's what's happening. Maybe not even just with us, but with others also. It'll come to something. And Prabhupada even said that to me once. Therefore, there should be a war. When the demons fight the demons, who wins? But if one side is godly and the other side is demons, then it's Krishna conscious.
Vijay Krishna Prabhu asks, he says, related to 115, where I find the translation saying, quote, and offering a seat of esteem to Srila Sutta Goswami. My question is, why is it that it is regularly seen that spiritual leaders like Srila Prabhupada the Pope, the Dalai Lama, and others are treated with esteem and great respect? Is it because they have valuable offerings to distribute? Is it that esteem and respect are the keys to open their hearts in order for them to bless us? With what blessings? Question mark.
They're treated with esteem because one should recognize them as very valuable people who can help us, saintly persons. And treating them with respect as far as their blessings, well, if just in an ordinary situation, if you're a teacher and you have something to teach, any subject matter, and there's one student who's rude and nasty and stays away and doesn't, and the other one comes up to you and says, "Can you please teach me? I'm eager to learn. Let me, here, let me get you a place to sit down, and you sit and you listen attentively, because that's what attention means, paying respect. They teach you. So that's just a natural thing in any circumstances that between a good student and a bad student.
Vijay Krishna Prabhu continues on this idea of the student, and he says, also related to 115, where I find the purport saying, quote, "But this should not be done in a challenging spirit." He says, "Nowadays it is common behavior from the students to offend their teachers, not only verbally but also physically. What is the root cause for this disrespectful behavior? Meat eating?"
Among other things, the 4 regular principles being broken: intoxication, meat eating, gambling, wagering.
Kendra Prabhu asks, it sounds as if Srila Prabhupada is saying in the purport to 116 that outreach, writing, teaching, etc. is not optional for spiritual progress. You've often given yourself as an example of this, that regularly giving morning classes helped you in your own life. Would you care to comment any more on this and how we can create outreach opportunities in our own lives?
Yeah, it did help me. I entered into a temple, and because I was a little older than most of the people, and I had some university degree, and so on, I ended up fairly quickly, way before I was ready, to be a temple president. And I had to give class. And when I first came there, people would tell me to go out and preach. We went out on the streets. We would be on the street corners, and half of the temple would chant, and the other half on the 4 corners would distribute magazines. And we were told to preach to people, and they just said, and don't speculate, just, what you've read. And there was pressure to both learn, give them some spiritual knowledge, and so what I did is people asked me questions when I was a brand new devotee, and practically had to, was like if you want to have a dog learn how to swim, you just take a puppy and throw him in the water. That's what they do. And so we were thrown in the water that way, and it was like sink or swim. And so they said me not to speculate. People asked me questions I didn't know. I would say, look, I'm new here, but I'll remember your question, and if you come tomorrow, I'll ask and see what the answer is. And then when I get in the Sankirtan van to go back to the temple, I'd have a list of questions that I didn't know the answer to. And so that was very good. And then fairly soon I had to start giving class, not to speculate. And so that really made me, read ahead and read other things and study very carefully. And then at first we had some tapes of Srila Prabhupada's lectures on a reel-to-reel machine. And then when cassettes came out, we had that was a big revolution because we had more of Prabhupada that way. And as soon as a new book would come out, we would all grab and devour it. So that's how we were eager to learn. And because you had to teach, you had to teach when you were out on the streets on Sankirtan. You had to when people came for the Sunday feast. And we had programs every evening. People would come. You had to teach. So it made you learn. And it was very effective. And with especially, and don't speculate. So I was always going to people, what about this, what about this, what about that?
Tulsi Priya asks, what are the effects of hearing from someone who preaches from the Vyasasana, but who is not spotless in character, following the regulative principles? Does Shastra act on the hearer in spite of the speaker? If so, then what does it matter if the speaker is spotless or spotty?
We don't really do a big test on people that sit down, and it turns out that sometimes some of the leaders in that movement were not spotless, even though they were sitting on the Vyasasana and giving classes. I assume some good things came through, but some devotees have had to sit down and wonder about everything that they've heard from the Vyasasana. You had to do that too. So, you surrender with your intelligence, but you don't surrender your intelligence. That's the difference. So you should also maintain your intelligence. And if somebody is saying something that seems to contradict what other people have said, or what the books say, or what Prabhupada said, that's a valid place to question. And if they just shut you up, you should find somebody else to listen to.
All right, I think that does it for today, unless there's any last minute. Lakendra Prabhu, oh wait, nope. Here we have a last minute at the cusp here. Bhakti Impala, she asks, related to Lakendra Prabhu's point, Urmila Mataji once made the point that every community needs a sense of us and them. If we don't go out and see non-devotees as them, we will start creating thems within our own community. Can you please comment?
I think if you were in a position where there were no non-devotees and everybody was a devotee, I don't think that's harmful. You can, under the present circumstances, okay, you can see yourself as different from non-devotees, and that's fine. But I don't think you have to have that in order to have cohesion with devotees. I don't know the whole context of this quotation of what she's supposed to have said, but that seems to me that it's sometimes it could be good to make you appreciate devotees more and to stick with them, but I don't think it's a necessary condition, even though sometimes it may be helpful in some circumstances. Especially when there's only 2 us's and 15 thems.
Shivananda Sena Prabhu asks, this is related to your earlier answer regarding your experience as a new bhakta. How do we maintain this spirit of inquisitiveness and humility even when we have been reading and practicing the philosophy of Krishna consciousness for some time and supposedly already, quote, understand the philosophy?
It should be, as you get deeper and deeper into Krishna consciousness by following the principles, that your Krishna consciousness should be increasing. And then you can take some book that you read 5 years ago in Krishna consciousness and read it again now and see things you didn't see before. So there's an unveiling that way. There's the 19th century German Lichtenberg who said a book is like a mirror, that if an ass looks in, no prophet's going to look out. You know, so it depends on your own consciousness, and it should be increasing, so that yeah, you'll see things. Just like I haven't read parts of this Bhagavatam in a long time ago, and like it's, to me, it's in some ways like it's fresh, it's new, and there's things I hadn't noticed before about them, because it is like a mirror. And then I don't know if I'm an apostle, but anyway. Maybe an ass looking in, but it's getting better at being a human being anyway, if not yet an apostle.
Just a few quick thank yous and greetings. Tulsi Priya and Devi Dasi says thank you for your response to her question. Kendra says thank you as well, and Gaur Shakti Prabhu says Hare Krishna, thank you for a very nice class, Gurudev, with the folded hands emoticon.
Okay.
And Devadarana Devi Dasi up in Albany, she says, please my humble obeisances, dear devotees, Hare Krishna, and all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Glories to Srila Prabhupada.
And Shivananda Sena Prabhu just says thank you as well in response to his question. So.
All right, you're all welcome. Thank you very much for coming to the Bhagavatam class, and I'll look forward to having time with you again. Next chapter, what happens next? Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.